Some great games and ideas just never quite make it to the market. Here are 20 ambitious games that were never released. If you want to read up more on them after the video, all of our sources will be linked in the description down below. Again, we got 20 games, so let's get started off with number 20. We're talking about Project Apollo, also known as the Christopher Nolan versus Batman game. Remember Shadow of Mordor and how everyone said that that whole Nemesis system where, defeated enemies come back for revenge would be perfect for a superhero game, or a Batman game? Well, here you go, because Monolith, the developers behind the Mordor games, were actually apparently working on a Batman game before reworking the entire thing into a Middle-earth game. This is where the entire Nemesis system actually started out and was going to let you drive the Batmobile around a fully open-world city. The weird thing about it was that even though this was being developed after the first Arkham game came out and was clearly heavily inspired by it, the game was going to be set in the Nolanverse with Christian Bale Batman and a more grounded approach to telling a Batman story. So why didn't it happen? Apparently, they had to get Christopher Nolan's explicit approval to make any game set in his universe, and he just never signed off on it. So they had to pivot to something else that Warner Bros. Owned. And in this case, it was the rights to making a Lord of the Rings game. Now over at number 19, we have Pirates of the Caribbean Armada of the Damned. This one kills me, dude. This could have been just the pirate game, and there's tons of footage out there showing it. But Disney killed it when they basically gave up on licensed games for a while, back in 2011. From all the pre-release interviews, this game sounds like it could have been an action RPG with additional elements. You play as a specific character, but you decide whether you wanted to be a legendary hero or a dreaded pirate. So you could be a swashbuckling good guy pirate or a Blackbeard-style terror of the open seas. You could sail a ship, explore islands, and recruit new crew members. There would be recognizable locations from the movies like Port Royale, and also supernatural places like Davy Jones's locker. The pre-release footage for this stuff honestly looked pretty great. This could have been a good one, but circumstances out of the team's control led to the game getting canceled, denying us what could have been a great pirate game. I always looked at this one almost kind of like Fable Pirates of the Caribbean. There's a lot of ambition, a lot of potential there, but it's another one that just ended up in the Disney vault. Next, over at number 18, we have Spider-Man: The Great Web. So take Marvel's Spider-Man, make it a 5-player co-op game, and make it mission-based instead of open world, and you basically got Spider-Man: The Great Web. It looks like this game would have been similar to Ghost of Tsushima Legends, but expanded into a full game. This did leak under unfortunate circumstances. Sony and Insomniac were the victims of a ransomware attack where their data was held hostage, and they didn't give in to the demands, so all this stuff leaked, and Spider-Man: The Great Web, this video concept trailer for it, really showed something awesome that we could have had. How they would have gotten Spider-Man combat to work with that many players, I have no idea, but it's a potentially really interesting idea because you would have been able to play as all the different Spider-Men from multiple alternate realities and go on reality hopping adventures through different visual styles and map locations. It could have been a really fun idea for Spider-Man fans, especially Spider-Verse fans, but was unfortunately canceled for unknown reasons. Maybe they're going to use some of these ideas for another Miles Morales spin-off, or maybe they just thought the multiverse stuff was starting to get a little played out. I don't know, but this is where we're at. Next, over at number 17, we have Marvel Chaos. Out of the many, many Marvel games we've seen come and go, this one actually looked promising. It was developed by Electronic Arts Chicago, the guys behind the Def Jam games. Yeah, remember those? I definitely do. This definitely looks like it could have been Vendetta on a massive scale, with battles taking place in these huge, open, and fully destructible environments, hence the codename Chaos. That's the ambitious part. The destruction physics looked really on point, and the game seemed like it would be able to depict some truly epic superhero throwdowns. Crowd interaction was also a big part of the game, with civilians who would cheer you on from the sidelines, drive cars, and swerve out of the way. It would have been kind of a more dynamic world than you normally see in a fighting game, but kind of reactive like the later Def Jam games. A lot of the pre-release footage that's leaked doesn't look too great, but on paper, there was a lot of potential here. Next, over number 16, we have Star Wars 1313. All right, this would have been Star Wars' answer to Uncharted. We all probably know this by now. It looked incredible back when it was revealed at E3 2012. I know the gameplay didn't appear to be anything revolutionary. It looked like Uncharted with third-person shooting and brawling. We've seen it before, but the visuals and the action and just the Star Wars immersion and the concept looked fantastic. It was the AAA action game that Star Wars had never really had up to that point, at least. The game was being developed internally by LucasArts, and George Lucas actually apparently had direct involvement in the project, rewriting the story, tweaking some things, mandating changes that some people working on the game apparently found frustrating. But believe it or not, down the line, it wasn't George Lucas who killed the game, it was Disney. This game was a victim of the Disney buyout. The merger, the whole corporate acquisition thing, they all but shut down LucasArts and development on the game ended. This probably isn't the only Star Wars project that was on the chopping block as the whole corporate thing shifted, but it's a damn shame because this one could have been cool, and later leaks suggested that it was maybe a Boba Fett game. There's a lot of lore and a lot of history to this one that we don't have time to cover, but yeah, Star Wars 1313, man, we're still thinking about this one. Now over at number 15, we have Tomb Raider Ascension. The original version of Tomb Raider 2013 was actually a lot more ambitious and would have been even more of a departure for the series than the reboot was. Some of the elements remained, like a more realistic looking Lara Croft and a spooky kind of Japanese island, but that's where the comparisons end. Instead of being this cinematic Uncharted style action game, Ascension would have been a fully open world survival horror game where Lara would ride a horse and sometimes fight off gigantic bizarre monsters, partially inspired by Shadow of the Colossus. There were multiple different versions of this game, one where Lara mostly engaged in melee combat, and another where she was protecting a little girl that she found. It was all very different from the game we eventually got. We don't know if it would have worked at all, but it would have been interesting to see, at least. Now, next over at number 14, we have Prey 2. This is another one I've harped on a lot, either on my channel or here on gameranx, man. This one still hurts. The announcement trailer for this game looked amazing. It was a kind of open world first-person shooter set in an alien city, and you play as a bounty hunter from Earth. It was kind of like a first-person cyberpunky Boba Fett game, and it looked so cool. It is a really unique setting for a game like this. It could have been really interesting if it ever came out. There is some gameplay floating around out there, and I'm still thinking about it to this day. We don't really know why development ceased on this one. It always looked like it was pretty far along, but from interviews, it's pretty clear that there is a lot of bitterness from developer Human Head Studios towards Bethesda over it, with one former employee calling the decision to cancel the game political and petty. Of course, that's only one person's side of the story, but still, maybe something happened there. Either way, the Prey follow-up that we did eventually get from Arcane was great and is considered by many very underrated, but I just can't help but look back at this one and think what could have been. This is a Star Wars game that I really want. Next over at number 13, stop me if you've heard this one, it's Silent Hills. This is another cancellation that we're all really bitter about. After years of the Silent Hill series floundering, Konami reveals that they're making a new Silent Hill game directed by Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid fame and his buddy Guillermo del Toro, famous horror movie director. And they formally announce it with one of the most interesting things done in the Silent Hill franchise ever, the free download teaser as PT, which stands for a playable teaser. So yes, Silent Hills wouldn't have been a full-length PT, and even if it was a mess, it would still be the most interesting thing to come out of the Silent Hill series in years. Of course, after Metal Gear Solid 5's troubled development, the relationship between Kojima and Konami soured, and when he left the company, the game got canceled. We eventually got Death Stranding, which apparently reused a few ideas that would have appeared in Silent Hills, but it's not enough. This thing could have been amazing, or at the very least, amazingly insane. Next over at number 12, we have Star Wars Battlefront 3. The original Battlefront games were great, and from the pre-release footage that's leaked from the third one, it looks like this could have been a lot of fun too. Rather than being developed by Pandemic like the first two games, this was being made by Free Radical, the folks behind the Time Splitters games. It had some impressively ambitious features like being able to seamlessly fly from a planet up into space on a single map, which still looks impressive even now, but apparently the project had a lot of problems. Now, apparently, LucasArts accused Free Radical of pulling Battlefront developers to work on Haze, another project. They also kept missing deadlines, which led LucasArts to assume that the developer had bigger, more systematic issues going on. According to the reports, though, LucasArts wasn't exactly in the right here either, with Free Radical accusing them of withholding payments and failing to acknowledge milestones. The relationship soured, and the game was canceled, even though by some devs' estimations, the game was 99% done at the time. A lot of this can be boiled down to he said, she said, maybe both of them are to blame, but with everything that we've seen, it looked like a really cool project. There were some really creative kind of what-if, alternate universe Star Wars ideas that leaked out from the concept art. There's a lot of stuff here for a Star Wars fan to dig into, and I'm gonna just stop myself here, but this had so much potential. It really hurts. Oh man, now at number 11, I'm going to start showing my age with Starcraft Ghost, one of the all-time classic cancellations. It's easy to forget just how ambitious Starcraft Ghost was going to be. From everything we know, it sounds like the game would have been a cross between Splinter Cell and Halo, with complex stealth systems and also in-depth combat and massive levels with vehicles you could pilot. There was also going to be a fully featured multiplayer mode with huge battles. They were planning a lot for this game, but for whatever reason, it never quite worked out. Development had changed hands multiple times, first with Nihilistic Software working on the game, then they switched over to Swing and Ape Studios before finally getting shelved. Internally, there was still a lot of interest in the game. It's clearly something that Blizzard wanted to make, but it was probably too ambitious and too different from the games that they normally made, so it was never able to reach that quality level expected for a Blizzard game, at least at the time. But the potential was there for this to really expand the StarCraft universe, and I remember a lot of StarCraft fans chomping at the bit for this one. You were able to pre-order it, people held onto their pre-order slips for years, almost until they turned to dust. StarCraft Ghost for many was just a brutal cancellation. Next, over number 10, we have Warhammer 40k Dark Millennium Online. A Warhammer 40k MMO sounds like an insane undertaking. The world of 40k is so absurdly massive and complex that it's hard to imagine where someone would even start trying to make an MMO out of it. At least one developer tried. They actually put some real effort into it because there's a decent amount of footage that's leaked out there. Ambitious almost feels like too small of a word for what they were trying to do here. Look at this. They wanted to create multiple playable alien races set on multiple planets with unique cities to explore and different worlds to conquer. And from what we've seen, it seems like they were trying to make the Warhammer MMO, but with 40k, which grounds what's going on a little bit. But it all sounds like they were basically planning on making PlanetSide 2 combined with World of Warcraft and EVE Online into a single game. The ambition was out of control here, obviously. And realistically, there was no way this game was ever actually going to get finished. But there's a lot of footage out there for more than you would expect. They gave it a shot, but let's be real here. I don't think this one was ever going to happen. It was crazy. Now over at number 9, LMNO. This extremely unusual game had a lot of interesting ideas going into it. It was worked on as part of a 3-game collaboration deal between EA and Steven Spielberg, with Arcane Studios brought in to do additional work on it. So the story had your character transporting an alien from the East Coast to the West Coast, avoiding government forces along the way. Between the action and sneaking parts, you would actually develop a relationship with your alien companion who had these complex AI systems that would affect their mood and change their reactions on the fly depending on how you treated them and how you played. It was meant to be this full AI character simulation inside of kind of a cinematic action adventure game, and was highly ambitious for the time. It's a good idea on paper, but I don't think they ever quite managed to figure out what would actually be fun about this whole thing, so the project was eventually scrapped. But if you want to hear about it, there's a lot of info out there. NoClip did a really cool documentary on it with some footage, so check that out. Now over at number 8, we have Tiberium, because these RTS spin-off games really can't catch a break. First, there was Starcraft Ghost, now this. This was meant to be EA's follow-up to Command & Conquer 3, which would have been a first-person tactical combat game with your standard first-person shooter action, but you can also command squads and call in airstrikes, among a bunch of other things. It's the tactical part that makes this game stand out. Being able to command squads of soldiers, call in reinforcements, and capture command points from a first-person perspective was a novel idea at the time, especially coming from a major studio that could actually make the experience pretty polished and cinematic. There's a lot of footage floating around out there with this one, but it got canceled back in 2008 for quote-unquote not meeting the standards of Electronic Arts. So either the game was really bad, really bad, or there was something else going on, because come on, we've played enough EA games to know that sometimes they don't have standards. This could have been cool. This could have been like CNC 3 first person, and that to me just sounds like cool on paper. Now over at number 7, a remake of a Nintendo 64 platformer doesn't sound all that ambitious, but Rare had some surprises up their sleeves, the developers. So before disappointing the world with Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, Rare was actually working on something called Banjo X, an Xbox 360 remake of the first Banjo game. Sounds pretty standard, at least that's how it would seem. At first, the game would present itself as just being a straight remake. But as the game went on, the characters would start breaking the fourth wall, talking about how they were in a remake, and do things differently. Different things would start happening in the levels, characters from later games would show up. Apparently by the end, the game would be almost entirely different. It's a creative idea for a remake that's never quite been done, I don't think. Definitely not on the scale that they're describing here. Maybe it would have been too meta and annoying. Maybe they were afraid all these changes would scare away people who just wanted a straight remake. Who knows? It's just disappointing that we never got this one, because it sounds like a clever twist on your usual boring remake. Now at number 6, we have a game called Raw. An open-world Grand Theft Auto roleplay inspired game? It sounds like a great idea, but this one seems like it was never going to happen. There was a whole world of Kickstarters and Indiegogo projects out there that promise the moon, get their money, and then things never work out. And for the most part, we're ignoring them, but this one sounded legitimately interesting. Basically, you take the freeform nature of GTA Online role-playing, which people have managed to do some amazing things with, it's a crazy community, but you would make a whole game out of it here, specifically designed to cater to those types of players. It's a novel idea. Something like that would cost tens of millions of dollars to make easily. But how much was Raw actually asking for their Kickstarter? Apparently only $75,000. They managed to exceed their goal, but this thing just never worked out. I would say, just from speculation, that there was no way they were making this type of game for just that amount of money. So it seems like it wasn't going to happen, but the thing that really shut this project down was when Kickstarter suspended the project entirely and refunded all backers. They tried pitching the game on other platforms, but the ship had sailed at that point. It'd be cool to see someone make a game like this someday, but for now, it's just not the case. Now, next over at number 5, EverQuest NEXT. This free-to-play sandbox game was meant to be the next evolution of the MMORPG and had some big ideas behind it. EverQuest was the original 3D MMO and is a formational game for a lot of people. It's set in stone so many of the things that players have really come to expect from MMOs, but EverQuest NEXT was going to be something completely different. Rather than a curated experience built by the dev team, NEXT was going to be a voxel-based MMO with a fully destructible world. Players could build structures, dig in the ground, and completely remake the world. It would have been like a persistent Minecraft world, but one that wasn't randomly generated, and it was going to be completely massive with secrets hidden all over the place. There were going to be dynamic events, large-scale public quests that apparently would have world-altering choices in them. Enemies would have complex AI systems with their own likes and dislikes. It's a hell of a lot, especially for an MMO. I have no idea if any of this all could actually work, but it doesn't matter because the studio was unfortunately sold off from Sony, and in a cost-cutting measure, the new owners canceled EverQuest NEXT. I seriously doubt the final game would have been as revolutionary as they initially promised, but even with only a few of the features that they were promising, this could have been something really cool. Next, over at number 4, we have Whore of the Orient. Now, okay, crazy title aside, this game was actually going to be a follow-up to LA Noire, but set in 1936 Shanghai. It was going to be a narrative-driven adventure game using the same face mapping technology used in that game. Now, what makes this ambitious is the setting. Shanghai in the 1930s is a fantastic location, and if they managed to make something as meticulously researched as LA Noire, this could have been something. But with no deal in place and the studio getting a ton of negative press around their allegedly abusive work conditions, they didn't get the funding or the publisher needed to get the game made. Only a single screenshot of the game exists, and it's really unclear if it's meant to be in-game or if it's just like a piece of concept art. Now coming down to number 3, Darkborn. This game, developed by The Outsiders and published by Private Division, was an action RPG with a twist. Rather than playing as a human slaughtering monsters, you get to play as the monster. Set in this dark, low fantasy setting, and the game would start off with you playing as one of the titular Darkborn. You start off extremely vulnerable, forced to rely on just like stealth to avoid enemies, before eventually working your way up and getting more powerful and cooler. One especially intriguing aspect of the game was that you would apparently play as multiple generations of Darkborn. It was kind of like this multi-generational RPG concept, and we're curious to see how that actually would have worked, because from developer interviews, it sounds like the game's scope just got out of control. It became open world, and then the amount of extra work required for all that and their ideas changing just killed the project entirely. Now down at number 2, Agent. Rockstar plus James Bond. It would have been incredibly ambitious and probably pretty great, but it never happened for one reason or another. The game got hyped up huge by Rockstar. It did get announced like it was going to be like a PlayStation 3 thing. It was considered to be like the next big pillar franchise for the studio up there with Grand Theft Auto, but they never actually showed anything from the game, and then eventually it disappeared without a trace. Not much is actually known about this one, but the name speaks for itself. An open world spy game from the masters of the genre. Like, it just sounds like a license to print money, but for some reason, Rockstar just never managed to make it work. One insider, which we'll link below, said that the pressure to get GTA finished was what eventually killed Agent. They had to reprioritize, but we'll never know. For now, Agent remains one of the great industry what-ifs. We still don't have like a definitive open world spy game, and at this point, maybe we never will. I don't know. I mean, at least we have Alpha Protocol. That's something. That's like kind of a weird spy game, but hey. Now finally, at number 1, we have Backspace. It sounds like the dream game. Sci-fi Skyrim with time travel, developed by Obsidian. This one wasn't in development long and was never officially announced, but there are a few things we do know about it. Shout out to Unseen64 for documenting this one. The game was to use the Creation Engine and was apparently going to be a mix of Mass Effect, Borderlands, and System Shock 2. There were going to be multiple planets to explore, as well as a giant space station. That's already a lot, but there was going to be a time travel gimmick where you'd travel 10 years into the future and then travel back and forth between the two timelines and not only see the world change, but also there were going to be RPG ramifications to that. Like it would, in the past, show humanity thriving while the future would be almost post-apocalyptic with aliens having taken over. All this stuff sounds great, but also extremely ambitious for Obsidian, especially back when they were currently working on Dungeon Siege 3. This was not quite yet the Obsidian of today. It seems like after years of financial difficulties, the studio suffered multiple rounds of layoffs, and most of the people working on Backspace were fired, ending the project for good. That's an unfortunate way to end, but on the bright side, like, just think of the amount of ideas on display here. These are 20 games that were canceled that were ambitious and potentially really cool. All we can really do is hope that a fraction of these ideas make it out to other games, right? I don't know. Let's talk about this stuff down in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions, and if you like talking games with us every day, clicking the like button does help us out. Thank you. But if you're new, consider subscribing as well, because we put out videos every single day. But either way, thanks for watching, and we will see you guys next time.